Hello, 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 and welcome to the Joy of Connection. And I'm so happy that you're here tonight. I'm really excited about my guest, and I'm really feeling hot. Yes, partly about my guest, but really, can you believe it? In the UK, it is hot, and my house just holds the heat in. So, as you guys know, a few weeks ago, I went from freezing, wearing a sweater and all that stuff, to the exact opposite, being boiling hot. But anyway, I'm here, we're here, and I'm really excited. The other good news is tonight's my anniversary with my partner, 4 years together. And I had to ask permission to skip our celebration tonight. We're going to move it on to the weekend. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm looking forward to our show tonight. It's going to be so good. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to the stage Kerri-Ann Appleton. Coming on, Kerri-Ann. Hi.
Hi.
How
So
are
excited to be
you?
here. First of all, happy anniversary.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully keep counting them.
Yeah. And if not, it's just a lesson to grow, right?
That's right. Well, I'm always
Mhm.
fluid, so I don't worry about that too much. But how are you? Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell everyone where you're from and where you live.
So I tell people I'm from Colorado, but I was technically born in Massachusetts, lived there for 2 months, and then was raised in New Hampshire of the United States, and then moved to Colorado and call that home. Half my family lives there, half in New England, but I live in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Ooh, Ria!
Yeah. So I love the music, and not that it was Brazilian music, but it's just that feeling of dancing. It's something actually I really have missed during the pandemic, because Brazil is all about the body and moving and dancing, which
Oh,
the Westerner in me has a little bit of a stiff kind of flow because we were trained differently, right?
not me. It
Okay,
was
well,
actually
me.
to me. Well, my family's from the Caribbean, so we
Mm,
dancing to reggae music or whatever. So
mhm.
yeah, and I've had the pleasure of going to Brazil probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. So I've been to samba school. I've experienced a samba school, I should say. I've been to carnival. I've been to many places, but Rio is my absolute favorite, and I still have good friends there, including you. So
Yeah.
one of these days I'll get back there and I'll see you there. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, exactly. Well, we would love to have you back.
Thank you. And how long have you been in Brazil?
I've been living here 5.5 years.
5.5 years. Wow.
Yeah. I was traveling back and forth for work for 3 years and then moved here.
Okay. Okay. All right. So 3.5 years of back and forth, and then living there for 5 years after that.
Yeah, like 3 years back and forth. I was here anywhere from 2 months to 5 months out of the year, working on
Wow.
some projects for an NGO, and then moved here. Yep, 5.5 years ago. Sold my condo, sold my car, my things, packed up my black Labrador, and dragged her to the Southern Hemisphere. So,
Wow. Well, we're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute, but I love that. I love that. So, can you tell the audience how we connected? Do you remember?
yes, of course, I remember. We connected through a business coach that we were both working with,
That's right.
which was such a beautiful group of people doing
Yes.
very similar work. I mean, there are so many like yourself, Deborah, and a few others that I've kept in touch with. And that
Yeah.
was like over 2 years ago,
2 years
maybe.
ago now.
It's
Yeah.
3 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been
Yeah.
in touch.
Yeah. It was during the time when
So,
my mum was quite ill. So it was 2018 going into 19, or yeah.
yeah. Yep.
Such
Yep.
a nice, doesn't it? Oh, we've got
Like a
someone in the
time
audience
went by.
that they love Brazil. So good to know. I can't see who the name is, but when we find out, we'll let you know. So tell me, our show is about the joy of connecting, and we're going to talk a bit more about your subject. But what I'd like to ask you a little bit about right now is, what do you do, Kerri-Ann, for self-love and self-care?
Hmm. Something I do every day when I wake up, when I go to bed, I put my phone on airplane mode. No Wi-Fi, just turn it off. I don't generally wake up with an alarm because I don't normally start my workday until at least 10.
Oh,
So I let
jealous.
my body, I know, I let my body naturally like wake up. But then when I get out of bed, I set a timer for 2 hours. And
Wow.
that's the only thing I do with my phone. And then I go into yoga first because my body needs to be stretched. And I don't
Mm,
necessarily do intense yoga. I just really start to bring life and fluid back to the body. Then I usually go on a 20 to 30-minute walk with my dog. I come
really?
back home. Yeah, I come back home and then I make a breakfast, a pretty low key, usually oatmeal with vegetables. That's funny.
Fruits.
With fruit. Yeah, I don't do savory, I do sweet. With like nuts and whatnot and coffee. And then
Mm,
I usually sit in my hammock and read. And then the
okay.
last thing I do is usually 20 minutes of meditation. And that's usually my 2 hours.
Oh,
And
that's a,
it's such a beautiful gift to give myself every day. It sets the tone. My mind doesn't go right into work mode, which puts me into a kind of a stress or a sympathetic nervous system. It just allows me to kind of ease in. And I find
mm,
I have more clarity throughout the day and I take better care of myself. Does that make
okay.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You set yourself up for the day. You put a beautiful ritual as your foundation. So it kind of puts you almost in superwoman mode, I would think. You're just kind of resilient because you've sort of put this beautiful aura around you to get ready for the day. So it sounds
Mhm.
perfect. I love that.
Yeah, I love it, especially with the hammock on the days it rains. I'm always bummed because I can't sit in the hammock, so I just sit in the chair and read. It's just not quite the same.
Oh, and Eva, one of our audience members said, wonderful self-care routine. And it really
Mm,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
I think some of us need to adopt that here. The problem is here, it's just cold and rainy. And unless you love that kind of weather, it's really difficult to get motivated to go out. I mean,
I love that kind of weather if I have a fireplace.
or if it's, I've grown up with Caribbean, not grown up, but used to going to the Caribbean, and when it rains, it's still warm. So you don't even mind if you're out in that. But when it's cold and it's damp and you just feel it to your bones, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I'll have to get used to that. But yeah,
it
yeah.
will.
And Aura in the audience is saying that you're saying all the things that she loves too. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
What a
I
great
would
point.
love to hear from people what morning routine or what their self-love acts are for themselves
Yeah,
because I think we can get so many ideas from each other. My
absolutely.
way is not the right way. It's what works for me and works for me right now. But there's so many ideas out there that we don't think about. Like I started this random thing of setting a timer for 2 hours because then I'm not worried about missing the start of my day or missing a meeting. I know, okay, I have these 2 hours, and then I just set the timer. When the timer goes off, it's like, okay, I now have permission to look at my phone
I
and turn my
know.
computer on. Hmm.
Great. I love that you take that time out for yourselves because it is so easy to just jump into the day, get moving, get frustrated, and then you haven't taken any time out for yourself. For me, I personally try to meditate every morning. And sometimes I just, my partner was away, and since he came back, I've been off rhythm. It's almost like, oh, who's this guy in the bed every morning? Just sort of like
Hmm.
way I can't exercise in the bedroom. Now I got to go downstairs, or I can't meditate in my bed or by the bed. I have to move, and I've just had to readjust um, to him being back. So
You make a really good point. My mom came to visit in March for 3 weeks, and the first couple of days I did, like let go of my routine because my mom was here. I was like, okay, let me be like a good hostess and take care of my
yeah,
mom, make her breakfast, blah blah blah. And then I noticed that I was becoming grumpy,
mm,
and I realized I had to sit and think about it and realize, okay, it's because I'm not doing a self care practice. So I sat down and had a conversation with my mom and I told her, Mom, this is really important to me. And you haven't said I can't do it, but I'm realizing that I'm taking care of you. Can I
mhm.
ask you, because you're a grown woman, can you take care of yourself for a couple hours in the morning? And she was like, yeah, of course. I know how to make coffee. I know how to make breakfast. You don't need to do it for me. I said, thank you. Because I could really still use my self-care practice. And it was so nice to honor myself that way. And it was so nice that I was supported. And then
Yeah.
everything started to shift. I wasn't grumpy anymore because I
But you
had
know
that
what's
time to myself.
more beautiful about that, Kerri-Ann, is that you had really clear communication. You asked your mum, obviously in a very loving way, do you mind? This is something that's important that I need to do. And she understood it, as opposed to you being sort of irritated, like, oh gosh, I'd be able to do this normally. And then, Mum, do you mind? And then her saying, oh yeah, I don't mind. And you just sat her down and said, this is why it's important and I need to do this. So that's
Mhm.
great on your part. Love that. Great
Well,
communicator.
I can't say I was always like that. I used to get irritated and not realize that my mom didn't know what I needed, but I also wasn't clear in communicating what I needed. And again, I learned that in childhood because my family modeled that back to me, because again, I wasn't modeled. They did what they were taught from their childhood, right? And then I was modeled it, so that's what I learned. So it's a practice. Let me tell you, there's been many times, I'm sure many people can relate to this, that we get irritated with our family or our loved ones and realize, oh, have we shared what our needs are? Do we even know what our needs are? Does
Well,
that make sense?
it's one of my top things when I'm coaching, about needs being met. So many people don't express what their needs are, but then get frustrated when they're not being met. But if you didn't tell the other person what you needed, how is it even going to begin to start? How is that journey going to begin if you haven't even explained that? So
Exactly.
that's so great. So you are an empowerment coach. Could you tell us what that means exactly?
Sure. What I really do, I mean, I help people to thrive by looking at and really discovering their unconscious beliefs, patterns, programs, that they don't even realize there, right? So,
Mhm.
for example, I had a client recently that discovered that she was holding herself back from doing what she truly loved to do because she had an unconscious program, story that she needed her father's approval, because that was what she was conditioned to do as a child, right? I mean, I
Mm,
think all of us can relate to wanting our parents' approval, especially when you start doing this work. So helping you to reprogram that so you have the freedom to live your life and really so you feel empowered. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So she was struggling and didn't even really know what it was about. And obviously, when you sort of peel back the layers, you realize
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
the issue was really not even necessarily about her, but a limited belief system of what her father
Exactly. I
had.
mean, honestly, we're all creating our personal realities. Now, that might seem far-fetched when you think about it, but your personality, so your habits, behaviors, are dictating what you do in the world, which means what shows up in the world. Because here's the thing, the mind is going to look for in the outer world things that affirm those unconscious stories, unconscious beliefs, until we start to examine them and realize, wait a minute, I'm doing this thing, or I have this belief. So my mind is literally looking for. So a great example is I would basically date my parents
That's right.
because that was familiar to me.
Mm-hmm.
That I knew how to navigate in the familiar. And once I realized this and started to unpack these stories that I was living by who I needed to become, I stopped dating my parents basically.
Great.
So that's
A lot.
and this goes for anything, relationships, finance, health, career. I mean, any pattern that you're seeing in the world can be drawn back to your belief systems. And then once you shift those belief systems and really you're creating a new neural pathway in the brain, different things begin to show up because your mind is looking for those different things. They're all there. Like we've seen the emotionally available man or partner, but we're not getting that. That's because it's not familiar to us. If we had grew up in a dynamic where one or both of our parents weren't emotionally available.
Mm, good point. Good point. And can you give me an example when you use finance as an example? Can you give me an example of how that might look?
So finances are both connected to your relationship because finance is about value, right? So when
Mm,
you're going into your career, it's like, am I valued? Valued as a person. So it can stem from a lot of childhood programming or childhood, relationship programming, especially ones that we had with our parents. But it also can be about the money story that you grew up in.
Mm.
So, for example, in my family, it was like we never had enough money, and then there was all these money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work hard for it. Money is the root of all evil. I'm sure we've heard a lot of these. And
Yes.
so it's reprogramming that. The same with
Mhm.
your health, the same with anything that shows up that's a pattern in your life, really. Or really anything that's showing up that you're like, why is this showing up? I don't like, in one point it served you, probably when you were 3 and you needed to have that serve you, but it doesn't need to serve you anymore. So for example, I had a client that was putting on weight and put on a lot of weight because as a child, she was sexually assaulted. And so because she was told she was beautiful, so she put on weight to not become beautiful anymore, so to protect herself. So I was unpacking all that. And we did this in alignment with a therapist, by the way, to support her, to
That's great.
unpacking all that to help her to basically shed the weight and realize that weight, she didn't need to carry that weight anymore. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
But at the
That's a
time, she needed it to protect herself.
right. That's a
Mhm.
really good example. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really, really good example, actually.
You're welcome.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Using certain systems to protect yourself in order
Mhm.
to, as I think Charlene talked about, self-validation is key. If you don't self-validate yourself, then you're holding on to what other people have said are true or what they believe to be true, and then you buy into that and
Mhm.
decide, oh yeah, they said that I was this, so I must be this because this person said that and this person said that. My teacher said it, my mother said it, my father said it. And then you start to buy into it because that's all you hear over and over again.
Yeah,
There's
I
not-
also think like for my childhood, there were times I couldn't, for example, place boundaries or my needs were not as important because if I did speak up for myself, I got abused. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So I had to stay quiet and live by their standards in order to survive. But that actually is not true anymore. But I had to unpack all of that and rewire my brain basically. And
Absolutely.
that came through thinking differently, feeling differently, acting differently, and also feeling any unfelt emotions from back then that were still living in the body. That
Mm.
makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. So if you I'm assuming you're referring to your family, right? That the things going on in your family that. So how did you change that pattern as you got older? Or did you change that
Well,
pattern?
I did change the pattern. Part of it is I had to put a boundary up. Once I realized, wait, this is not right. I always thought it was right because it was familiar. That was what was normal. And then realizing, especially as I saw different things in the world and started just tuning in to myself, I'm like, this doesn't feel right for me. So the first thing I did was to place a boundary up to say, I don't want to be in this, put myself in this situation anymore. And I'm an adult now and I can do that. That was really hard actually, because we
Mm.
want to be accepted, especially by our family. We come from our family. It's our first tribe, right? Now that doesn't mean I don't have a relationship with them and things have definitely changed. But if I put the boundary up first, then go ahead and do the work and start going into a self-discovery process from the place of the observer. I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings. They are just experiences. So I had to practice that self compassion to say, yes, as a child, these things happened to me. That does not mean I'm bad. Yes, I did these things as a child when I was younger. That doesn't mean I'm bad. I did them out of a place of self protection. But now I don't have to do it anymore. I don't have to blame myself. I just have to recognize I had that thought, I had that feeling, I made that story, I've been living by it.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes an emotion for me comes up. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be sadness. And I allow the emotion just to come up and out of the body. When I fully step in and give the body freedom, it usually moves through me in 90 seconds to 3 minutes. Now, I've had to practice this for a long time because we're so disconnected from our bodies. We live so much in our head. We
Mm.
don't know how to self regulate. Most of us have never been taught how to self regulate or how to tune into our emotions. Now, granted, we actually all naturally know how to feel our emotions. You look at a baby and they just move through emotions so quickly. And then there's some point where they're told, don't cry over spilt milk, or I'll give you something to be angry about, or whatever. And they're basically told to shut up, don't feel. And that goes, different things are told to us based on our gender too. So we actually do know how to feel our emotions in a very healthy way, but we've been told not to. I don't think it wasn't intentional. I think we didn't know. Like our parents didn't know, our grandparents didn't know. So now it's like relearning that and then moving that emotion out of the body. I've really realized that when I move that old emotion out of the body, it's a lot easier to accept the new story because my body's not living or holding on to that memory anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And would you say that's more of a first world problem? Because, well, not really a problem, but a situation. Let me rephrase that. It's not a problem. Well, yeah, in some ways it is a problem. I take that back. Yeah. Because being very involved in the Latino culture as you are right now, I find that men are much more open. I mean, my partner will cry at the drop of a hat. He'll cry before me. I can tell you that, free of charge. He'll express how he's feeling, and if he's angry, he's angry. If he's happy, he's happy. If he's sad, and he will display all those emotions and let you know how he's feeling. There's none of this. Even though Latinos can be quite machismo, he doesn't machismo in terms of, I'm the man, maybe, but not in terms of, oh, I'm afraid to show my feelings, because he's absolutely not afraid to show his feelings at all. At all. Do you experience that with Latin men in general, Brazilian men?
I do to some extent. Like I always say that Brazilians are so great at getting their anger out, where I can only compare it to the United States, where we hold ours in until we explode. And that explosion could just be yelling and projecting. It could be something more violent. I think some of the reasons why we have all these violent acts, mass shootings, is there's so much pent up anger that no one knows how to move through it. But here in Brazil, not to say that those things don't happen, but I'll see a taxi driver get upset at another driver and yell, blah, 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 and then just be happy as can be. It's kind of like a dog, and I'll use my dog as an example. We'll be walking and she gets upset at something. She barks at it. It eventually she moves away, or it moves away. She shakes her body, and then she's like, happy, happy. She's just moved the energy out of the body. It's over. It's done with. She doesn't even remember that situation happened. And this goes back to Peter Levine's work around somatic experiencing, where he talks about even like when we get into a car accident in the United States, or into an accident, they immediately like put the body on a gurney and like tighten it down, right? Instead of allowing the body to just like shake and move to release the energy of the emotion, because emotion is just energy in motion. And the piece that we often miss is the motion part of the emotion.
Okay.
So I think not only are you reprogramming your mind, but I think I really believe that you're healing yourself, because all that emotion gets stored in the body, right? And so just healing yourself, freeing your body of this energy that's just been stored in there.
So true. And you mentioned earlier self-regulate. What does, self-regulating your body, what does that mean for some of the audience members that may not know that?
Sure. So throughout our day, we get into what's called a parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system. Most of the time we're in our sympathetic. So we're in fight or flight. And we may say, I'm not stressed, because we've normalized stress. But one of the reasons why I don't turn on my phone anymore the first 2 hours is because I used to turn on the phone, get a dopamine hit, and just my mind would start going. I got to do all these things today. And even if I could go, okay, let's do yoga first, my mind was already racing because I checked my email, I checked social media, and I wasn't fully present in yoga and in my body. So I decided, okay, I need to get off the addiction of the dopamine hit the first minute I wake up. So set the timer, give myself these gifts for 2 hours.
Yeah.
and help myself to stay more in a parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest state. That doesn't mean sleeping, though you are, when you're sleeping, oftentimes you're more in your parasympathetic. That basically means that you're more relaxed, you have longer breaths, your heart is beating at a normal pace, and you're sending blood and energy to your digestive tract to digest. And you also are more relaxed in the mind, which means you can find clarity. Because when you're in stress, you're acting more from your
Yeah.
amygdala, which is the part of the brain that you experience emotion, and less from the subconscious and conscious mind. This is why when you get triggered, I tell my clients, you got to self-regulate first. So like a simple thing you can do is take longer exhales. So if you do 4 count inhale, 6 or 8 count exhale, you're literally bringing the body back into a parasympathetic. So when you're in a triggered situation, if you need to move out of the situation to stop being triggered, that's step 1. So you're not re-triggered by whatever the situation is. And then just taking deep breaths with a longer exhale brings you back into your parasympathetic nervous system. And then once you really relax, then you can find the clarity. It's like your mind expands to find the clarity of what is really happening. Because if not, we're reacting from more of our reptilian brain. And usually we do something or say something that then we regret. And then we feel bad because we regret it. We feel guilty. We blame and shame ourselves because you're like, I didn't really mean that. I was just angry.
Yeah.
Versus, okay. Not to say that I don't still do that, by the way. I still do.
We're
A couple
human.
months ago, I was irritated with my roommate, and I was getting angry, and I said to him, "You're a terrible communicator." And the minute I caught myself, I said, "Oh, I have to stop right now, and I have to go walk away." And like come back down and then come. And once I was in a regulated state, self-regulating myself, not needing anything in the outside world that includes food, alcohol, drugs, Netflix, sex. I mean, trying to think of anything that you could use that would numb you or self-regulate you. I just chose to go outside, take the dog for a walk, have a breather, come back in, and then I could own what I did, clean it up, and then communicate in a way that's actually more in integrity with me.
That's great. I like that. In integrity. I love that. And so how has it been coaching over Zoom or whatever method you use during the pandemic? Has that been positive? Has that been negative? How's that worked for you?
It's been fine. I haven't made too many shifts because I was already coaching over Zoom. I mostly have international clients and Brazilians. And so there wasn't a huge change. I work remotely in essence. The biggest thing is I have found more people had the time and are like, it felt like they were like, I'm ready now to do this work. Like I need to do this work.
Yes.
So it's really nice.
I got a lot of requests, especially from clients that I think when they realize that, wow, we don't really know what our life is going to be like in a year from now. We don't really know what's going to happen. Let me really examine my life and look at what I'm happy with, what I'm not happy with, how I can make a change, all of that. And I think that COVID has been great in terms of that. People have done a lot of self-reflection and figured out, do I want to be in this situation? Do I want to be here? Do I want to stay here? Do I want to be with this person? Do I want to be without this? All those questions that they probably asked before, but just sort of because they were running, not having time to think about it. It's just like, oh, I'll deal with that later. And that later never came. I'll deal with it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So, yeah, that's interesting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our topic tonight, betrayal. And I wanted to say to the audience, Kerri-Ann and I had a brief chat about this, and I was sharing with her something quite personal that, when I think of betrayal, and maybe you and the audience can let us know as well, but when I think of betrayal, I automatically think, oh, it's, your partner cheated on you, or somebody was your friend and they said or did something that betrayed you, and you thought you'd given them something in trust and expected them not to share it, and they shared it, something along those lines. Family member said or did something to you that you just can't move past. That's what I often think of betrayal. But I actually went back and thought about a situation in my life when I was married, and my husband and I had made this great plan to have a family through non-traditional methods. I'll leave it at that because the show's about Kerri-Ann, not me. And essentially, he went back on his word, and he did betray me, and he didn't do what he said he was going to do. And I hadn't really thought about that as betrayal. But as Charlene is saying here, yeah, for me, betrayal is when your trust is broken, and that is absolutely it. It's not necessarily anything specific in terms of, it's not necessarily a specific act that only goes with one person or one thing. It is betrayal of trust, period. I think that's what I would say. So, Kerri-Ann, you've been so gracious to come on and share with us, what happened to you in your betrayal. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was and what happened?
Yeah. So I was in a serious relationship where we lived together, and we were planning a life together here in Brazil. We had even tried to get pregnant. We got pregnant. I miscarried, or we miscarried. So for me, I felt like I was in a serious relationship. Like I said, we lived together. We made this commitment. We actually had a commitment ceremony, not in terms of marriage, but in committing to conceiving a child and being parents together to this child. Because I try to do everything, with a lot of intention behind it. And I thought this would be this beautiful ceremony to commit to being parents to this child. And then it was so interesting because a couple days before everything, the D-Day, as they call it, Discovery Day, I started to feel like something wasn't right. I kind of always knew, and now you look back and you're like, oh my God, there were so many red flags. How did I not see it? But there was definitely, yeah. So something stronger was growing in me, and something wasn't right. And then the next day, so that was on a Thursday, I remember. So the next day, we woke up and he knew something was off. He's like, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I just didn't sleep well, because I knew I couldn't share what I was feeling with him. Something was like, don't share with him. This is about you right now. And then he went to work. I work from home. It was interesting because I had 2 client calls that day, and both of them, there was like signs. Like one of them said, oh, I had to let go of a friend because they betrayed me. And another one said, I let go of my boyfriend because he's not the one. And it was like this, I just really felt like I was hearing like, you got to let go of him. But my mind is like, but why? But why?
Right. Where's the evidence?
So I asked him if I could have the weekend to myself, because he often went to go see his parents to help them out because they're older, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked him, do you mind if I have the weekend to myself? I could just use some me time. And he got really used to the fact that I come from another culture and honoring my me time, because it's not something that they do here in Brazil. But he got used to that. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to stop by and just grab some clothes. And I was like, okay. Well, I never came by to grab some clothes, but no big deal. I didn't think twice about it. But later on in the evening, something said, go to his nightstand, the table next to his side of the bed. And I was like, what? I just heard a voice, go to his nightstand. So I go to his nightstand, there's a stack of paper there. And on top is it's like a bank statement for a property of a woman. And I thought, what is this? So I message him, and he's like, oh no, it's a former colleague. She's helping me out with a project and whatnot. And something said that's not true. So there was a phone number. I called her. And that's how I found out. So he'd been together with her almost 5 times longer than he's been together with me. So anytime he was actually going to see his parents and helping them out, he was going to see her. And he was living with her too. So, and any of his work trips, he was not taking work trips. They weren't work trips. They were trips with her. So that was like devastating. I was like, what? Yeah. And what's interesting is she knew nothing about me. We actually got together the next day. We had a big cry fest together.
Wow.
Um, she knew
Right.
nothing about me, and he did a really good job at
Yeah.
hiding it. Can I just tell you one thing that was just blew me away? Because her and I chatted like all night long, and we sent like pictures and things back and forth. He gave us the same Valentine's card, the exact same one. It just was crazy. I just still laugh at that. I'm like, wow.
Oh my God. I
Yep.
mean, how, well, I was going to ask you, how did you come back from that? But before that, how did you even have that conversation with him whenever he came back? We've got Claudia
Wow.
at the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah. So it's interesting. She didn't want to say anything to him. She wanted to like set a time, like I would meet him at a place, a location, she would show up. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't need to manipulate anything. I'm just gonna call him out. So I did, and he denied it. And he showed up that night drunk, and he denied everything. He said she was lying, and I was like, no, she's not like, no, she's not lying. And then it was really interesting because he sat here and he slowly folded his clothes. It would take like 1 minute to fold and put one shirt in the bag. And I got so irritated. I was so angry. I'm like, how dare you come into my space? Because this was the apartment was in my name. How dare you come into my space? I just swooped up his clothes and threw him out of the second story window onto the street. I'd never done anything like that in my life. I was so angry. Like, I remember working with my therapist and having so much shame around that. She was like, really? You have shame around that? She's like, I think
Yeah.
you need to let that go. If that's the
Yeah.
worst thing that you did.
Yeah. That's
Because I was so angry. I was so angry. And so, yeah, I felt like I knew I was going to get through it. I knew it was going to be hard because I'm very well resourced, you know. But I also realized I'm like now 2 years later, I'm grateful that it happened. Not because it's like, oh, I found out about him, blah, 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 but I'm grateful for everything I learned because of that experience. So I think sometimes, as much as we go through some really crappy things, if we can look at like how it helped us to grow and where I am today because of that situation, like I'm very grateful for that. But the pain was really, really hard. And initially I got some really bad advice. And then I started to really find my way again. Do you want me to share more about that? I'm
yeah.
happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
So a couple of things like that I realized. So if anyone that has gone through betrayal, or in the future, if you ever get betrayed, which I hope that you don't, for sure, I hope that people don't get betrayed. First thing I want to say is that I realized that because I wasn't listening to the red flags prior to, I was betraying myself. And partly that comes from conditioning and programming, right? You need to have evidence. And I never had evidence, but I always felt something wasn't right. But there was always, like a proof that what I was thinking was not true, that he was where he said he was going to be, or just weird things that I was like, this is weird, but okay, it's the culture. Okay. But it wasn't, and some of it was the culture, but it wasn't true. He used the culture basically against it. And in all honesty, he acted the way he acted because of his own trauma from his childhood. So hurt people. He doesn't have the tools or awareness to recognize that. And so what he was doing, in essence, was out of surviving.
Survival mode.
Was out of surviving. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that I was looking back now, I realized how much I self-betrayed. And so I needed to learn how to trust myself and know the difference between fear and wisdom.
Good
Because
one.
we can feel fear and go, oh, that I'm trusting myself, but that's fear, and fear usually wants to be faced or something needs to be learned, versus wisdom, which you don't need any explanation. And
Right.
once you tune into your body and start feeling those differences, you know, and you don't need to explain it. And some people will think you're crazy. It's okay. You could be crazy. Just
That's
trust
right.
yourself. But the
Yeah.
one thing I took away was there was I went through I don't remember the name of the program or like the organization that put it on for the life of me, and it's okay. But I did this like 1 week like recovery from betrayal because I felt so lost. I didn't know anyone who'd gone through something like this that could support me. And I went through this program, and it was very interesting because they told me I shouldn't talk about it and I should protect him because he probably has more shame than I do. And I
Interesting.
would say, so I thought, okay, that makes sense, because I'm a good person. I want to help people, and I care for people. And I get it that like he did this out of his own trauma. But what ended up happening originally was I put his needs over mine. So once I started to learn, no, I'm going to talk about this.
Good for you.
I'm going to put my needs first because I need to heal from this, and I can't support him. And whether I choose to or not, which in the end I chose not to, but I can't support anyone if I don't heal myself first.
Absolutely.
So the other thing I did, and this came from the advice of my therapist that was really helpful, is I only spoke with people about the situation that had my best interests at heart. And what I mean by that was that they didn't project their selves or what they would do on me. They knew me enough to go, wait, this is about you, not about me. So I'm here to help you, not to project what I would do. And that was hard for some very close friends. I love them dearly, but they were projecting onto me. And I
Yeah.
needed to come back and find my voice and my truth.
Yeah.
And I get it. They loved me so much, and they wanted so much to like not have me not feel the pain that I felt. But I needed to have someone that was going to look out for me, help me look out for me.
Yeah.
So that was something. The other thing that took time was when you realize you've been betrayed like that, in essence, you've been gaslighted and manipulated. So I look at the story of the Joker from
Batman.
Batman. Thank you. I was like, which one is it? But there's the
Yeah,
movie
I was
about the
sure
Joker.
either.
Yeah, there's a movie about the Joker, and I actually watched that movie as I was healing from the betrayal, and really could resonate with him because he was lied to. So he thought, who his father was one person, and then find out it's not. He was completely lied to. And I was lied to for 2 years, and so in that time we were together, and once I found out about the betrayal and felt gaslighted, manipulated, I didn't know what was real or what was not real from those 2 years. So that even included my coaching. I had to stop coaching, in essence, not fully coach, because I launched my coaching business while I was with him, and I wasn't sure if it was true or not. Does that
Good.
make sense?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. So what I ended up doing was finding things prior to the relationship that I knew that were true. So I worked for nonprofits prior to, so I actually went back into doing some consulting for nonprofits because I knew that to be true. And I had to find my truth again and find my confidence again. So anything I did prior to that relationship, I reconnected with to start gaining confidence and trust in myself again.
That's
Does that
good.
make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. Nice approach.
Yeah.
Because it's so unsettling and it just throws you off, especially when you consider yourself a good judge of character. You
Mm-hmm.
know that you listen to your intuition as a rule, and then the one time it's almost like I took my eye off the ball for 1 minute and this happened, and then you go into that blame game. Well, I should have
Mm-hmm.
seen this, as you
Yeah.
said, red flags, what was I thinking? Charlene here says, did you ever question your part in his betrayal towards you? It might sound like a crazy question, but I think it would make me question myself. So did you ever question your part in his betrayal towards
Yeah. I mean, I definitely questioned a lot of things about myself, about did I do something wrong? Um, I went through a lot. I mean, I blame myself again because the red flags were there, you know. Um,
Can I interject for a second? Were the red flags like waving like this, or were they just subtle?
oh my God, they were waving, but at the time they were subtle. I think because, again, going back to not recognizing that this was a familiar pattern, because
Mm,
love him dearly, but my father also cheated on my mother. So right out of the gate, when I was 2, they got divorced. Like that all unfolded. But then, in essence, you talked about earlier when we started the subject of betrayal, that it's like promises that aren't kept, where you can't trust. And for as long as I can remember, when I was a child, from 2 to about 15, 16, my dad would make promise after promise after promise to me. I'm going to be at your birthday. I'm going to be at your ski meets. I'm going to be at this. I'm going to, and oftentimes not show up. It was rare for him to show up. And so constantly I'm betrayed, but constantly I gave him another chance. I'm going to be there next time. I'm going to be there next time. And I just wanted to believe, and I wanted to be loved and belong, right? And I wanted to see the good in people. That doesn't mean my father isn't good, but I
right.
wasn't learning the lesson, and I was allowing him to betray me, and in essence betraying myself, because over and over again I was feeling disappointed. And so realizing that I was playing out the exact same pattern in all of my relationships when
Wow.
it
So
came to romantic ones. Yeah.
mm,
And this one was the big one. And it's kind of like the universe was saying, you've got to learn this lesson. And so we're going big or going home.
wow,
We've been hitting you over the head, but you're not paying attention. And so, and
right.
I really believe that everything happens for you, not to you. You can look at it as everything's happening to you, then that just puts you in the
Mm,
victim seat. And I'd
right.
rather be in the empowered seat. So everything happens for me. Wow, I needed to learn this lesson, to learn to trust myself and learn to create clear boundaries and say, listen, Dad, I love you,
Right.
but this is not acceptable anymore. If you want to be a part of my life, you have to show up. If not, you're not a part of my life. But I didn't have words as a child to say that, right? And I
Oh,
always get, and then what happened when I was like 15, he started to show up and be in my life. So I had this belief to say, see, if you believe hard enough, they're going to eventually show up, right? You got to just believe,
right.
you got to believe in them. You got to see the best in them. I just kept seeing the best in my dad. And same thing with this relationship. I wanted to see the best in him. And I bet when it comes to, because we trauma bond, right? When it comes to his trauma, that's all he wanted, because all he wanted was to be seen by his parents. And here was this woman seeing him and seeing him. Even for all of his faults, I was still seeing him. I was still showing up. I was still accepting him.
I have
Does
to
that make
ask you,
sense?
yeah, but I wanted to ask you, did he ever apologize? I mean, when he truly knew that you knew at that point and he'd admitted that he had betrayed you, did he ever
No,
actually apologize?
no,
And do you think,
he went into victim. He blamed me for outing him. He blamed me for destroying his life. He blamed me. And then a couple months later, he tried to get back with me. And he has tried for several months. And actually, last conversation was a last email he sent. I've ignored every email
good for you?
he sent, asking to be friends. And I just said, no, like, I see your messages. I want nothing more. This chapter is closed. Respect my boundaries. Thank you. I'm not being mean. I'm not responsible for his healing. He's responsible for his healing. I have
Absolutely.
done my work. I have forgiven him.
Right.
I have no judgment towards him, because of the fact that I can see that this is clearly a trauma from his childhood. And his intention is so good. He wants to survive, and he wants to thrive in this world. The way he's going about it is not healthy. And I can also put a boundary to say, I don't want this in my life. And that's okay.
Yeah. Kerri-Ann, we could spend another hour talking about this. This is just so deep and so interesting. I really, really love you for coming on the show and being so open and vulnerable. It's a beautiful thing. We have to start wrapping up the show. I
That's
can't
okay. That's okay.
an hour. But, you know, I'd like to leave with this one question. If anybody here who's watching today or who watches it in the future is being betrayed and they know it, but they kind of sort of don't want to deal with it for whatever reasons, may it be that, all that comes with the betrayal means the loss that will come with it as well. And some people don't want to be alone, or just facing and dealing with who you are and what your part was and that you played in the whole situation. But for anybody that maybe as we speak being betrayed or having just recently been betrayed, what advice would you give to them? Is there any parting words you could give to them?
I think to start with, why am I staying? Like, not questioning yourself from like this place of judgment, but getting curious of like, what am I gaining from this, like this relationship that is keeping me here? So what is keeping me here? And most often and you dig down deeper, most often it's coming from, I'm staying because of security. I'm staying because of approval, because I want to belong. Does that make sense? And then realizing that, wait, I can start to take my power back and source my security within myself and source my approval for myself. It might take some steps. So for example, you're in a relationship and that person might be betraying you, or they're betraying you, but they are financially providing for you. So a lot of women get caught in that. I know that. And even some men get caught in that. They're financially providing for you. And you're like, I can't leave. It's my sense of security. It's my sense of what would other people think about me. Start making steps to changing that. And I think that the more that you would be surprised with how many people would embrace you and support you. Even though you think, oh my God, they're gonna, because I chose wrong. I mean, that was definitely me, where I felt like I chose wrong. And my friends were like, your intention was so good. You did not choose wrong.
That's right. You chose
And
you.
yeah, well, no, when I chose him, it's like, you
Oh,
chose
sorry.
wrong. And
Yeah.
not, my friends weren't like, yeah, we told you. None of them. Your intention was so good. You did not choose wrong. And you don't have to stay. Does that make
When you
sense?
empower yourself, you don't have to stay. It takes a while to get there, but when you do,
Yep.
oh man, it's so beautiful. Being in control of your destiny to the best way you can. Kerri-Ann, I just want to thank you again. I've got some comments here that I really want to share with you before we go. Sabrina says, I'm so happy you found your truth again. Beautiful.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Eva said, emotional betrayal is the hardest to learn from.
That's so true.
Aura said, exactly. We must take accountability from our own healing to stop projecting our traumas onto others.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, Carly says, my advice would be not to beat yourself up, blame yourself, wrap yourself in regret. It's an easy spiral to get into. And it is. Yeah.
It
And
is. Yep.
says, thank you. I enjoyed today. So,
My pleasure.
thank you so much for sharing it. It's a very difficult conversation to have, even 2 years later. I know it took me a long time to talk about my betrayal. And, it's just sort of coming to grips with, like you said, it's not necessarily that you even did anything wrong or they did anything wrong. Maybe you're just in different spaces, but you have to put your boundaries in place and you have to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's key. And
Yes.
as Eva said, this is a great one, Eva, making the decision that you deserve the best.
And I want to reframe boundaries, not just from protecting yourself, but respecting yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful one. So with much respect and love,
thank you so much for having me.
And what time is it in Brazil?
It's 5:30 in the evening.
Okay. Oh, well, obrigada. And I
De
hope,
nada.
hope to see you sometime soon.
Yes. Ciao,
Thank,
ciao.
thank you.
Beijos.
Thank you. I'll see you in the green room. Don't disappear. So, guys, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, we're still getting more comments. Thanks so much, Kerri-Ann. Stay empowered. Thank you for sharing, Kerri-Ann. Wonderful subject tonight and a lot to take away. So really, really helpful advice there. And just know that if you are being betrayed, you know, you're not alone. As Kerri-Ann said, that the good people that know you and believe in you will be there for you. So as I wrap it up tonight, as I always say, be joyful, be connected. I got interrupted by reading the message. Be joyful, be connected, and shine your light. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful evening. Good night.